So yeah, we just read uh from this book, Mythology by Edith Hamilton, in the chapter on the two great gods of earth, Dionysus or Bacchus, the Greek and Roman names. Uh yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about it and then maybe I'll try to fill in and then we'll kind of talk about what the chapter talks about and just kind of our own thoughts.
Oh, okay. Like his origin story or
Yeah,
something.
just what we just read.
Okay. Um, so yeah, when we started reading the book, we kind of learned about his origins. His father was Zeus, and he was the son of a human mother, and um, he loved her a lot and wanted to grant her whatever wish she had. And she asked to see him, Zeus, in his full form. And um, and when that when Zeus did that, she died because no human being could survive seeing him in his full form.
Yeah.
Um,
And he had
but
loved her a lot, I guess maybe more than all his other sort of
yeah,
uh dalliances besides Hera. But
yeah,
yeah, she had made him promise by the river Styx, which even he cannot break. So there's that association already with death.
yeah, yeah.
The
And
river
Hera was
Styx
she?
being the river of the underworld that people in Greek mythology, I guess, pass through uh on their way to the underworld.
Yeah, and Hera was already unhappy about the relationship. So yeah, when he showed his form, right when she died, he managed to take Dionysus out of her womb and kind of,
Yeah,
I don't
sew
know,
it up into his side.
incubate, yeah, kind of finish incubating
Yeah.
himself until he was born.
Yeah.
Uh, and then when he was born, I guess he became like, I guess he like traveled the world, right? Eventually,
Well, yeah,
uh,
as when
gathering
he reached
followers.
manhood and
Hmm.
spreading worship of him, teaching people about him,
Hmm.
teaching them
Yeah,
the
and
cultivation of the vine,
mhm.
winemaking.
Yeah, and he got lots of women followers that would kind of go into frenzies and run off into the forest and do the feast of blood they described in the book.
Yeah, tearing
And
apart sometimes wild animals and eating
mhm,
the raw flesh and things.
mhm. Yeah, and they seem to live like very natural type lives. So it says they lived like in meadows, I think near pine trees or something. And during the daytime, their lives just seem really natural and idyllic. Uh, but then the feast would kind of show the ugly side of nature,
Yeah.
I think. Um,
Yeah. And the
so yeah.
worship of him instead of being in ordered temples and ceremonies was in nature, outside the
Mhm,
cities, outside the dust and the ceremony and the all the things of
mhm,
society.
mhm. So yeah, he traveled from country to country, gathering followers until he reached Greece. And when he got there, I think there was a king, like his cousin, that
Well, well, that was his home city where his mother was
mhm,
from, Thebes.
mhm. So he reached there, and his king was dismissive of him, and kind of hostile, I guess, towards the idea of following him and having Thebes kind of worship him. So
Mhm.
uh, Dionysius and his followers got imprisoned, and he would keep coming out of the cell several times to
And
warn
his
the
followers
king.
too could not be kept. The doors opened on their own.
Hmm. So yeah, he did that, but the king would keep uh, kind of rebuking him every single time until eventually the king met a terrible fate when he went to kind of capture his followers up on a hill or something they had escaped to,
Yeah.
and his all of his female family was there too,
Yeah.
and Dionysius kind of sent them into a frenzy, and they went mad, and his mom uh, participated in ripping the king limb from limb.
Yeah. Yeah. And also Pentheus is that was the king's name. His sort of denial of the power and denial of entry, I guess, of Dionysus to his kingdom and his angry sort of rebuke of him was sort of parallel with what had happened earlier to with the king Lycurgus, which I think was the lawgiver of the sort of mythical lawgiver to Sparta. And and actually Dionysus even hid from him for a while, but eventually, Lycurgus was punished, uh, first sort of playfully being uh, hidden up in a cave by Dionysus, but eventually put to death by Zeus.
Mhm.
But the book says that you cannot strive with the gods for long and live. But yeah, again, like I talked about Dionysus having showing a lot of compassion, and maybe there's a sort of parallel with the Buddha in his compassion and playfulness and sort of his de-emphasis on laws and barriers and things like that, which his his conflicts with and the angry uh rebukes that he got from Lycurgus and the king and Pentheus the king,
Mhm.
kind of there's a parallel there with both Jesus and Buddha.
Mhm.
But then in terms of the frenzy of madness, he's a little different from both Jesus and Buddha.
Mhm.
But like you said, yeah, that's sort of like the dualism of nature in the book shows the
Mhm.
sort of dualism, just the very honest portrayal of what happens under the influence of wine. Sometimes,
Yeah.
great freedom, revelry, and also violence and crime.
Mhm.
I guess, yeah, freedom in its larger, yeah, freedom and all its implications. But yeah, there's some good passages there. I thought I might read those.
Mhm.
Might read a little bit of it. And then we can talk maybe about, yeah, we we mentioned how the worship of Dionysus is in like outside the city, unlike most gods.
Mhm.
And he was a god that was the most human. There's another parallel with Jesus, because he was the only of the Olympian gods who had a human mother. The worship of Dionysus was centered in these two ideas so far apart of freedom and ecstatic joy and of savage brutality. But in a way, that's what freedom is. Yeah, and Dionysus, like Jesus and Buddha, is also a figure of liberation of the soul.
Mhm.
It talks about how his cult was many followers of Dionysus never actually drank wine at all, and his cult was responsible for a belief in the afterlife. But one thing I wanted to mention besides the fact that they worshipped him outside the city temples, they did worship him in the city, but in another sacred place than temples, which was the theater. It was the theater, and the ceremony was the performance of a play. The greatest poetry in Greece, and among the greatest in the world, was written for Dionysus. The poets who wrote the plays, the actors and singers who took part of them, were all regarded as servants of the god. The performances were sacred. The spectators, too, along with the writers and the performers, were engaged in an act of worship. Dionysus himself was supposed to be present. His priest had the seat of honor. It is clear, therefore, that the idea of the God of holy inspiration who could fill men with his spirit to write gloriously and to act gloriously became far more important than the earlier ideas of him. The first tragic plays, which are among the best there are, never equaled except by Shakespeare, were produced in the theater of Dionysus. Comedies were produced there too, but tragedies far outnumbered them, and there was a reason why. This strange god, the gay reveler, the cruel hunter, the lofty inspirer, was also the sufferer. He, like Demeter, who is the other earth god that is talked about in this chapter, was afflicted, not because of grief for another, as she was, and she was associated with the mystery of Eleusis, which is a fascinating topic, but because of his own pain. He was the vine, which is always pruned as nothing else that bears fruit, every branch cut away, only the bare stalk left. Through the winter, a dead thing to look at, an old gnarled stump, seeming incapable of ever putting forth leaves again. Like Persephone, Dionysus died with the coming of the cold. Unlike her, his death was terrible. He was torn to pieces, in some stories by the Titans, in others by Hera's orders. He was always brought back to life. He died and rose again. It was his joyful resurrection they celebrated in the theater. But the idea of terrible deeds done to him and done by men under his influence was too closely associated with him ever to be forgotten. He was more than the suffering God. He was the tragic God. There was none other. And then she starts talking about the so he's the tragic God, he's the sufferer. We celebrate him through narrative outside of the city and also in the theater. So he still had another side. He was the assurance that death does not end all. His worshippers believed that his death and resurrection showed that the soul lives on forever after the body dies. This faith was part of the mysteries of Eleusis. At first, it centered in Persephone, who also rose from the dead every spring. But as queen of the black underworld, she kept even in the bright world above a suggestion of something strange and awful. How could she, who always carried about her the reminder of death, stand for the resurrection, the conquest of death? Dionysus, on the contrary, was never thought of as a power in the kingdom of the dead. There are many stories about Persephone in the lower world, only one about Dionysus. He rescued his mother from it, as you mentioned, and then she was the only human that was allowed to live among them. She was, after all, the mother of a god. In his resurrection, he was the embodiment of the life that is stronger than death. He and not Persephone became the center of the belief in immortality. And then they end the chapter with the passage by Plutarch, after which he
Okay.
writes to his wife uh, after the death of their young child.
Mm. Yeah, it's like I was kind of surprised when I heard it was theater, but that makes sense because like he's channeling himself when he sends his followers in a frenzy, and then like in the theater, he's kind of channeling himself again through like the actors and
Yeah, right.
everyone involved, and in that
That's
way,
right.
like he becomes immortal because he's resurrected like every single time those stories of his are acted out and
Yeah. Yeah,
played.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he becomes embodied in others. And in
Hmm.
that way, he is the most human of the gods, too. I mean, Zeus is more like above everybody else, right? He literally is above in the clouds, thundering down with lightning and, thunder. It's elemental, it's above us. It's not, but yeah, he's part of us. And, you know, the analogy with wine just just keeps coming. And there's, wine is inside of us, and we act through it and everything. I
Mm-hmm.
like how the wine, including how the vine, the life cycle of the vine and its harvesting and everything is sort of like the perfect analogy of all the things, all the actions that are inspired by its human product, its human refined product. I mean, wine does naturally happen, like with fruits and even some animals actually like get intoxicated from eating like rotten fruit and stuff. But yeah, yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and then again, there's sort of an analogy with Jesus and the drinking the wine, the Eucharist and everything, or communion. Yeah, and there's a sense, yeah. In theater, there's like the play is not only the play that you see, but it's written down and it's will be enacted again and again and again. And even we still are enacting the Greek plays from, thousands of years ago. But yeah, the idea of worship being theater is pretty powerful. I don't know if we have that, but I'm sure some lovers of theater feel something like that. And it is different than seeing it on a movie where it's a recording. You're not really there with them with your body. Although maybe we could, someday write some kind of account, or maybe there is already a good one written of movies and transformation. Yeah, that's a thing. Yeah, living forever is not staying the same as life. I mean, as life, you're born from another, you're born and you change. If there is an idea of immortality, there is this idea that of another transformation and maybe continual transformation. But yeah, the chapter ends around the year 80 AD. A great Greek writer, Plutarch, received news when he was far from home that a little daughter of his had died. A child of most gentle nature, he says. In his letter to his wife, he writes, about that which you have heard, dear heart, that the soul once departed from the body vanishes and feels nothing. I know that you give no belief to such assertions because of those sacred and faithful promises given in the mysteries of Bacchus, which we who are of that religious brotherhood know. We hold it firmly for an undoubted truth that our soul is incorruptible and immortal. We are to think of the dead that they pass into a better place and in a happier condition. Let us behave ourselves accordingly, outwardly ordering our lives, while within all should be purer, wiser, incorruptible. But yeah, I think all of this is fascinating. But do you have any other thoughts for right now?
Mm-hmm. Not really. Just how it, I haven't really seen much theater in my life. Maybe two or three times.
Mm,
Uh, it'd be nice to maybe see a Greek theater
mm,
if I get the chance.
yeah. What do you think about transformation, liberation, immortality, incorruptibility?
Mm. Well, that's a thought that's hard to put into words
Yeah.
for me right now.
But do you
Uh,
think
that
if life goes
uh,
on, it involves transformation, or maybe just
I'm
liberation through transformation, and there's a feeling of, yeah, immortality there?
not sure about those topics specifically, but I was just thinking how uh, Dionysius kind of being remembered through these stories and plays. It's kind of an immortality in itself.
He's living
Um,
on, we're
yeah,
living.
and
through
Yeah, and
like,
like
yeah, having this life live through us.
yeah, so in a way that gods keep living forever as long as we try to keep those things alive.
Yeah. Do you think there's a power in sort of having having things live through you? It'd be interesting to ask an actor this.
Mm,
I mean, don't do you feel like
yeah.
you live narratives? I mean, isn't that kind of a truism that of modern times that we're living narratives and sometimes I guess the contemplative Buddhist sort of tradition is and the Stoics say there's liberation actually through breaking the bonds of those stories and
Mhm,
seeing clearly how we're just living our thoughts, living stories rather than
mm,
living what is actually happening.
mm. Not so sure, but I would think maybe there's the power in the sense that you feel a part of something bigger or
Yeah.
keeping a tradition alive, and that makes you feel less lonely and more connected
Yeah, for
with
sure.
the world and the past. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, the just like the mysteries of Eleusis in those Greek tragedies, the whole community, yeah, felt very strongly. These were stories
mm,
they already knew very well, and people maybe
mm,
they could identify with or they could understand very well, and that they
mm,
felt a palpable relationship
mm,
with. And there was a palpable
mm,
relationship that those stories and those personages had in their lives.
mm. Yeah, and I would feel maybe a sense of that would make most people happier and more connected.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I'm not sure with what you mentioned with the modern stuff, it kind of breaking apart from those stories, like what it's we've talked about a lot, but what it's going to be replaced with, and we don't really seem to have something adequate yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem very good to train yourself and to find techniques so that you can break some really negative stories and
Mm,
a lot of stories about success or failure or comparing yourselves to others that can be implicitly very isolating. Like even a success story that you're not living up to, even if you were living up to it in your life. I mean, you could feel good in some way, but some of that would be, besides, sort of fulfilling real needs rather than going beyond that, uh, is ego and comparing yourselves to others.
mm,
You know, being successful is usually means doing better than others, not merely. I mean, there's like a reinterpretation of that maybe, but
mm,
maybe a lot of success stories though are just a lot of it is like doing better than others,
mm,
doing materially well, so that, in a way that others can see and sort of give you recognition for that can
mm,
distinguish you among others. But that is, yeah, that is isolating, rather than feeling all together in the same narrative. And it is in these narratives, in these Greek plays, or maybe it's not about there's a circularity to the fact that yeah, you already know the story so well, you're just singing the song again, but it's not like yeah, the end and the beginning kind of tie together maybe in some way. And that seems to have something to do with maybe immortality, how the end is the beginning. Yeah, there's a circularity there. Okay, maybe talk more about this next time and maybe even sometime kind of talk about the mysteries of Eleusis and maybe more, maybe sooner than that, read the chapter on Demeter.
mm. Sounds good.
Okay, well, talk to you soon.
Yep, bye.